Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about a very important skill in academics, talking about evidence. Specifically, what is it? Why is it important? How do I find and interpret evidence? How do I use it in an essay? And what do I need to know about evidence in test questions? Let's get started. Alright, so first of all, evidence in academics basically refers to quotes or paraphrase sections of a passage that are used to prove a statement. So you have some sort of claim or some sort of statement that you are trying to prove is correct. So you need a quote from whatever text passage you are reading to actually prove that that is correct. So we're going to look at an example here that we could possibly be trying to prove. So we're going to look at a theme. Here's a theme. Stereotyping can make people feel misunderstood and isolated. So we're trying to prove that that theme is correct in our passage. So while we are reading our passage, in this case, Shrek, we could come across this quote. Look, I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me. People take one look at me and go, ah, help run, a big, stupid, ugly ogre. They judge me before they even know me, that's why I'm better off alone. This quote is good to use to prove that that theme is correct, basically for two reasons. First of all, it shows that Shrek does feel misunderstood due to stereotyping. You can see that when he is saying that people are judging him before they even know him. And then it also shows that he wants to be alone, which kind of gives that idea that he feels isolated because of this. So we are successfully proving that our theme up there is correct because we are able to pull in some evidence from the passage. That's basically all there is to evidence. But we'll look a little bit more in depth in that in a minute. First of all, let's see, why is evidence important in the first place? Well, basically because an opinion alone doesn't really mean that much. It isn't that important. Even if you're right, actually. You could be completely 100% right about something, but if you can't back it up with any evidence, it's not going to be really taken that seriously. However, if a statement or opinion that you have is backed with some evidence, then it will be taken more seriously. People will take evidence more seriously than just an outright opinion. So finding evidence is very important, both in academics and just in life when you're trying to prove that you're right. All right, another reason that evidence is important is because a statement backed with evidence is more likely to be true. So if you're trying to find some sort of truth or something that's right, going with something that is backed with evidence is going to be a lot more likely to be true. Not always, but you're definitely looking better if you have some evidence behind you. And lastly, if you are looking for the right answer or you're looking for wanting to be right yourself, you definitely need evidence to prove all of that. All right, so you see why evidence is important. So how do you actually find good evidence, particularly in a text? Well, there's a few things you want to do. First of all, you want to identify what you are supposed to actually be looking for. Is your question that you're looking for, are you looking for theme? Are you looking for something about a character? Are you looking for what the setting is of your story? So you want to identify that first, and then you want to try to figure out what the text is really saying about that. So you're going to have to analyze a little bit. Sometimes this can be very easy, and sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. It's really easy when the text just kind of clearly states your answer. So like, for example, if it's saying, what is the main character's main name? What's his name? All you're going to do is look and it'll say their name pretty plainly, and that's a really easy piece of evidence that you can just find. However, most of the time it's not that easy. Usually you are actually going to have to do a little bit of interpreting. So when the text does not say what you're looking for just outright, super clearly, you're going to have to interpret a little bit what it is actually saying to get your answer. We'll get into that in a second. All right, so after you have figured out what you are looking for, then you go ahead and read the text and try to figure out what it's saying. then you can try to identify some quotes in the text that directly show what you are trying to prove. Right? So now we did kind of talk a little bit about how this might not be super easy though, how you'll need to interpret evidence sometime. So go ahead and look at some examples of what it looks like to interpret evidence to find out what an answer is and stuff like that. All right, so let's say we have this question. What's the setting of the story? And we are looking around in the text and we come across this quote. I walk along the salty air brushing sand against my feet. Notice it does not ever say in here that the setting is this. But if you look at it and you're reading it and analyzing it a little bit, you can see that it mentions salty air, it mentions sand, so we can go ahead and assume that the setting is probably going to be on a beach. We are interpreting that the setting is this. Even though it doesn't ever say the word beach, we can still figure it out and interpret the text and use this as good evidence. Let's look at this example. So we're trying to look for what is John like, this character John, what's he like? And we are looking around, we find this quote. John stormed through the door and stomped his way to his seat, but he didn't say a word. So notice nowhere does it say anything outright about John, but we can see that it says instead of John walked through the door, it says that John stormed through the door and he stomped his way to his seat. So here we can clearly see that John is angry about something, and we can use this quote as evidence to prove that even though it doesn't outright say that he's angry, we can still interpret this quote and figure that out. All right, then we got this one. What is one theme? This is a little bit of a harder question, and to be honest, whenever you're finding something like theme that's a little bit deeper, being the message or moral of the story, you definitely want to have a decent idea of what the story is about first, and you want to read the text first all the way through, and then you want to kind of think to yourself what you think the text might be saying, what the author might be saying about life through this text. Then you want to go ahead and look around for the quotes so you kind of know what you might be looking for. And you might come along with something like this, a quote like this. Their heated argument subsided as he kissed his wife's forehead. They knew that this too would pass. So once you have found that, you can kind of assume that this might be a theme in that passage, that love can overcome many obstacles. So this quote would prove that that is true. All right, so let's go ahead and look at how we would actually use evidence in writing if you are writing an essay. So first of all, do not use evidence if you are in your intro paragraph. You only want to use evidence in the body paragraphs. In the intro paragraphs, the only things you want to have is you want to have your statement to hook in the reader. You want to explain some background information about your topic, and you want to answer the prompt in a thesis. If you don't know any of these words that I am listing out on this slide, I will be having a video at some point that talks a little bit more about essay writing, and I'll go into more detail about these, but I'm going to kind of assume that you know what these words are. All right, so when you're actually in your body paragraph though, you want to start off with a topic sentence, which is one reason from your thesis, and then you want to pull in evidence to prove that your topic sentence is true. So that's going to be that claim you're going to have to prove. And then once you're actually to the point where you want to pull in your evidence, then you can follow these steps to try to put in your evidence well. First, you want to set up for it. So you want to say something like, for example, or this is seen in passage 2 when it says this, and then you can throw in your quote. And then you want to explain what the quote is actually saying. So here's an example. By mentioning sand and salty air, the setting must be on a beach. So I'm kind of explaining the quote I used. And then you always want to tie it back to the point that you're actually trying to make, which would be your topic sentence, which is a part of your thesis again. So you could say this proves, and then whatever your statement is that you're trying to prove. You want to kind of always tie it back to that. Here's an example of kind of what it looks like. Examples are pretty helpful. Let's say we have this prompt: write an informative essay that explains how social media is impacting businesses. Your essay must be based on ideas and information that can be found in the passage set. So we're thinking about it, and we go ahead and at the end of our intro paragraph write this thesis. Social media is largely affecting businesses by creating huge online markets and giving them tangible customer feedback. Notice that the thesis is basically just like the prompt. It's just an exact answer of what the prompt is basically asking for. And that's basically what we're going to have our essay going around, is proving this thesis is true. So then we have our body paragraph where we're going to incorporate our evidence to prove that our statement is true. And the first sentence of the body paragraph is going to be a topic sentence where it says this. To start off, social media is affecting businesses by creating large markets that can tap into specific audiences. Notice that this is just one reason from the thesis up there, which is answering the prompt. That's how that structure kind of works. So just know that. And then you can go ahead and try to prove that that statement is true. So you see that I'm setting up for here. One example of how this is happening comes from a case described in source 1 about how Walmart used a quote-unquote social media celebrity to bring in new customers. The source states that the giant corporation is counting on the social media celebrity to draw in crowds of shoppers. This is especially interesting as they can even tap into a very young market. This is seen when it says that the celebrity was only a 6-year-old YouTube star. It later states that they use this specific market to attempt to sell bubble pets, t-shirts, and capsules full of green slime. All this goes to show how social media is impacting the business world by creating specific markets. So if you look here, you can see that I'm doing all the ways of incorporating my evidence. So I'm setting up for it. I'm explaining what the evidence is kind of saying. And then I am showing and basically making a statement saying, hey, this is proving that this topic sentence is true, my main sentence that I'm doing at the beginning, that this is a true statement, and I just kind of tie it back to that. So there's just a brief example you can look at. Let's look at test questions. So this is specifically going to be talking about test questions involving quotes or involving evidence, but also please note that pretty much any test question that you're ever going to come in contact with, you're going to be much better off if you are consulting your evidence, consulting the text, and interpreting stuff, because that's going to point you toward the right answer. But this is going to be specifically for evidence or questions that involve evidence or quotes. All right, so like with any test question, you want to first of all know what the test question is actually asking you. And there's kind of some subcategories in this for quotes, for questions with quotes. First, you might have a question where it gives you a piece of evidence, and then you have to come up with what claim that is proving. So here's an example. In the passage, Shrek states that they judge me before they even know me, that's why I'm better off alone. What does this suggest about Shrek's character? So you see that it gave you the quote, and then you have to figure out what that's saying about Shrek's character. So you have to find out the claim. But the question could also be kind of reversed. They could have where they give you the claim, and then you have to pick the best evidence. So we'll look at what that looks like. Which evidence from the passage best supports that Shrek was negatively affected by stereotyping? So here you see that they are giving you some sort of statement or claim, and you're going to actually have to pick a quote from whatever options they give you, and you're going to have to pick the one that best supports that. And actually with this kind of thing where you're picking quotes, there's even like kind of another subcategory that you really want to pay attention to, and that is, are they asking you to pick the best evidence, the worst evidence, or all the evidence? You want to really, really know what exactly they're saying. So in this question example here, they're asking for the best evidence, so you want to pick the one that most shows, the best one that shows that Shrek is negatively affected by stereotyping. But it also could have said which of these doesn't show that Shrek is affected by stereotyping. Then you're going to pick the odd one out there that doesn't show that. Or it could say, pick all the evidence that supports that, and then if it even supports it kind of, you want to include that in your answer. So that would especially be true if it's like if you can select multiple answers, then it might say that, or if it just says like an all of the above thing. All of the above is particularly, you might think it's all of the above if it just says which evidence from the passage supports that Shrek negatively affected by stereotyping, instead of saying best or worst or anything like that. Then you can kind of assume that there's a pretty good chance that it might be all of the above, because basically you would have to not say that at all for it to be wrong. Anyway, that's a lot of detail on that. Let's go ahead and go to the next part. So after you know what the question is asking you, then you can go ahead and interpret all the evidence that it gives you. What is the quote really saying? You want to look at all the quotes that it gives you and interpret that like we talked about. And then, quite simply, you want to just pick the answer where the evidence leads you. And this is true for literally any test question, not just ones that include quotes, because basically answers that are backed by evidence are always going to be a bit stronger. So you want to follow the evidence. All right. Now let's go ahead and look at finally an example of one of these test questions and kind of walk through how I would answer it and how I would think about it. So we have this question here. Which of the following quotes best shows that Shrek is upset by how he is perceived by society? So we see that this one is wanting us to pick the best one, and it gave us the claim. So we already know that Shrek is upset by how he is perceived by society. And we just want to pick the answer that shows that the best. So let's go through each of these and see which one shows that claim the best. So let's look at A. Now, ogres, oh, they're much worse. They'll make a suit from your freshly peeled skin. They'll shave your liver, squeeze the jelly from your eyes. Actually, it's quite good on toast. This is kind of a funny quote, a little gruesome as well. But here we can see, let's see if this is answering that claim. So again, we're trying to figure out, is Shrek upset by how he is perceived by society in this quote? Well, we can see here that he is clearly referencing the way that he is perceived by society. So people think of him as some ogre that would squeeze the jelly from your eyes, which is kind of gross, but he is saying that. But he also has kind of a joking manner as well. The fact that he mentions it's good on toast, you can clearly tell that he is kind of joking around with this. So I don't think it's completely proving this statement, because he doesn't really seem upset about the way he is perceived by society. So let's look at the next one then. Let's look at B. No, I'm not an ogre, you know. Grab your torch and pitchforks. Doesn't that bother you? So here he was talking to Donkey here, and this is a quote that you would definitely want to know the context of a little bit. And just as another little side tip, whenever you're looking at quotes, you don't want to take things out of context. You want to know where the quote is coming from, everything, and this would be a prime example of why that's important, because it kind of looks like he might be upset, and he is saying, grab your torch and pitchforks, like that is the way people perceive an ogre, that they should just be killed and stuff like that. But he's not super upset here, and part of the reason I can see that in this quote is that he's saying, doesn't that bother you, when he's talking to Donkey specifically. He's not talking about how it bothers himself, how it bothers himself being Shrek, that he himself is perceived as an ogre. It's saying, aren't you bothered by the fact that you're with an ogre that's perceived this way? So it's a little, I don't know if it fully shows that, not really. But this one is a little bit closer. But we'll see if there's another quote in here that is a better answer. All right, let's look at C. Look, I'm not the one with the problem, okay? It's the world that seems to have a problem with me. People take one look at me and go, ah, help run, a big stupid ugly ogre. They judge me before they even know me, and that's why I'm better off alone. So this one does seem to clearly show, and sorry for using the same quote again, but this one does seem to clearly show that he is upset. He's clearly upset by the way people are perceiving him in society. He's saying that they judge him before they even know him, and he definitely seems upset about that. So that's going to be our answer, but we do want to check, as good practice, we always want to check all the answers as well, and we'll see if D is maybe even a better answer. All right, so let's look at that. There's nothing to tell besides, even if I did tell her that, well, you know. And I'm not saying I do love her, because I don't. She's a princess and I'm an ogre. So here you can see he's a little frazzled. He's kind of all over the place and stuff, but you can see that he is definitely upset. He's upset that he is an ogre and that she is a princess, she being Fiona. So it does see that upset part. The thing that is mainly missing here is that you don't really see in this quote how he is perceived by society. It's maybe a little bit assumed by him saying that he's an ogre, but it also might not be. It might just be the fact that he is an ogre and doesn't have anything to do with the way he's perceived by society. So that's, I think, a close answer, but I don't really super see the perceived by society, but I do see that he's upset. For that reason, I would definitely go with C, because you can see this is definitely the best evidence. C is definitely the best evidence, which is what we are looking for here. We're looking for the best evidence, because it does show both parts, that he is upset and that he's upset about how he's perceived by society. So hopefully this video was helpful for you to kind of figure out how to go about finding evidence and using it in your writing, and going about answering test questions that ask you for quotes and things like that. Evidence is a very important skill that is in both English class and other classes, so I hope that you will take the time to try to master this and everything like that. But anyway, that's it for this video, and see you next time.